and who you can contact when you have questions. The EU thinks on different aspects of our work here in Uganda. You're always welcome.
Your Excellency Jan Sadek, Ambassador Jan Sadek, the EU Head of Delegation to Uganda, the Deputy Head of Mission, Mr. Chatwin, the members of the delegation of the EU here present, representatives of the sounding board, EU sounding board, youth sounding board, my colleague, Margaret Kafero, Head of Public Diplomacy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the media practitioners here present. I think Ambassador Sadek has emphasized the important role that the media plays. All the work that we do, if it is not covered, it will not be appreciated or even known about by the public. So we really appreciate your presence here today. I would like first and foremost to thank Ambassador Sadek and the team for organizing this important event where we look at the partnership between the EU and Uganda over the last 50 years. I endorse and support everything that he has just said in terms of the strength of the partnership that we have between Uganda and the EU and the EU member states taken in general. And he has highlighted all the achievements that we have registered over the years. He has pointed out, of course, the overall investment that the EU and its member states are making into the country, close to 5 billion euros in development cooperation, as well as almost a similar amount in terms of the private sector investments as well. The sectors that the government of Uganda really appreciates the support that we get from the EU and the cooperation span development cooperation in general, infrastructure. He has mentioned the Northern Bypass, which has been a very useful connection in terms of the Northern Corridor, as well as some other infrastructures, the roads that really link our country, because we are land linked. We don't want to say that we are landlocked, we are land linked. But the infrastructure that links Uganda from Kenya all the way to Western Uganda, Rwanda, the EU has made a significant contribution in their development and rehabilitation where necessary. Then he has talked about education. I don't have to go into the details. Health, we have a lot of support that we get from the EU in terms of health. In energy sector, because if you want to develop the country like we're doing, energy is extremely important. And the EU has been a reliable partner in that regard. Of course, there is water and sanitation and trade, investment, and tourism. In terms of trade, the European Union has, of course, offered for a long time duty-free, quota-free access for Uganda as a least developing country, for everything but arms. And as a result of that, our exports to the EU have well gone over 1.5 billion euros. And it's one of the some of the trading partners where the balance of trade is in favor of Uganda. But since this is a forward-looking partnership, we also have now to look forward, because it was well when Uganda was the least developing country. We are now moving into the middle income status, and that means that we'll have to negotiate at some stage an economic partnership agreement with the EU. And we believe that in doing so, we'll also be looking at some of the other elements, because moving from least developed country to middle income comes with a lot of expectations, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we have some transition, and this is something that at an opportune time we should be looking at. In terms of coffee, which is one of our major exports, the EU takes about 72% of all the exports of coffee from Uganda. And that is extremely important. We would like to see, however, that we add more value to the coffee. And that is why we are looking forward to getting investors who can come set up a shop here, process, add more value, and then we export more processed coffee than the green beans. And as Ambassador Sadek pointed out, this is extremely important because it contributes to improving the livelihoods of our people, since the majority of our people depend on agriculture. Then, in terms of investment, yes, we have, like Ambassador Sadek referenced the EU-Uganda Business Forum. I've had occasion to attend many of, I think about 2 of the last 4, and you can see the partnership that is coming from the private sector, joint ventures, as well as provision of funding from the European Investment Bank for some of the, affordable credit for women in business, for youth entrepreneurships. So when we say that the partnership between the EU and Uganda is strong, it is because we see benefits, tangible benefits that we are deriving from that partnership, and they spread across the width and breadth of this country. Of course, since our population is very young, I think 50% of our population are living 30 years and below, so creation of employment opportunities is extremely important. And this is something that we would like to continue partnering with the EU in order to make sure that our young people have opportunities right here, so that we don't face the challenges that we see arising out of migration to other places. And of course, climate change is a big challenge that we have, and we are glad that we are working with the EU to ensure climate resilience. Finally, in conclusion, on behalf of the government of Uganda, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I would like to thank the EU delegation, the EU member states in general, for the partnership that we have with the EU that has now spanned 50 years, and we look forward to achieving much more in the future. The good thing about our partnership with the EU is, even when we have a few issues, we engage constructively in dialogue, and we believe that through constructive dialogue, there is nothing that we cannot resolve. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellencies, for your insights and for engaging with the Ugandan press. So at this moment, we would like to open the floor for questions. If you have a question to our speakers, you raise your hand, and you could come forward if you'd like to use the microphone so that we have a clear audio of your question. So Hans, you come forward, you mention your media house and your question. I think we could do a round of 3 questions first, and then we allow our speakers to respond, and then we can take more questions from there. So, gentlemen, please come. Are you audible? Can you hear him? Yeah? Okay, speak up.
You can speak from there. Your name and the media house, please.
Kabone Sierra is my name. I work for East Africa. In connection to my colleague's question, we are shifting from least developed to middle income. And that shift, Ambassador Mugera warned that it might disrupt the relationships, the trade relationships we've been having with the EU, because we shall have to renegotiate the trade agreement. I wanted him to take me through the process. And then also, we have timelines. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. My name is Faraja. And my question is to His Excellency, the Ambassador. My question is, you talked about exporting as you can. Then also, I would like to know, are there any structural constraints that are limiting us to even export more of what we export to the European Union? Thank you.
Okay, you can respond to those questions.
Thank you very much. Very clear questions. I think the two first were for Ambassador Mugera. I can perhaps also chip in something, but if you start, Ambassador, and then I take the third one.
Thank you, Excellency. The first question, I think, was from Nabat, from URN, and it related to what options or what will be involved in the transition. First and foremost, I think we have not been officially declared middle income. This is a process that is done through the UN, and there is a process, but we've reached the threshold. And in terms of the process, fortunately, we have been under the East African Community partner, the EAC partner states have been negotiating an economic partnership agreement with the EU as far back as 2007. I recall being in Brussels in 2007 as part of the EAC delegation to negotiate with the EU regarding this economic partnership agreement. That is about 10 years ago. So we already have the basis. Actually, the EAC EU economic partnership agreement was initialed. However, along the way, the negotiations didn't proceed. And so the text is there. So we're not going to start from zero. And it's the same text that our neighbors, Kenya, signed on. And I think Rwanda has also signed. So we have a basis. It is just a matter of finalizing it. And we do not believe that there will be disruption because of the strength of the partnership that we have. But in terms of the process, what it means is that we are bound to liberalize our economy a little bit more in terms of the goods and products that we are going to allow from the EU. What normally happens is that we also have some sectors that you prioritize the key sectors, and you decide that on those ones we will not open up immediately. And some of them include, critical foodstuffs, I think like rice, sugar. So some of those are protected. But the idea is to progressively open up to 80% for all EU products to come in duty-free. And then the 60% we can still have, the 20% we can still have some tariffs on them. But at the same time, that has also to be matched with development cooperation in terms of building the capacity of our economy to be able to export more. So the supply side constraints will also be looked at. So the EPA has both the trade liberalization, but also the development component, which talks about building the capacity of the country to be able to take advantage of the opportunities. I hope that is that is enough to explain the issue. But we are not bothered. We are not concerned that there is going to be any disruption whatsoever, because, like I said, the EAC has been engaging with the EU over a number of years, and we already have an initial text. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Mugabe. I can just testify to that and underline that the economic partnership agreement will be necessary for Uganda and the European Union to sign when Uganda becomes a middle-income country. That's the current facility, the Everything But Arms, is only available for the least developing countries. So this means that as Uganda will be sort of certified as a middle-income country, there will be a transition period of a few years under which, you know, the old rules will still be valid. But then during that period, we need to sign that agreement. The agreement already exists and is in principle ready to be signed. It was signed by Kenya recently, and we have signed economic partnerships agreements with many other countries in Africa. I think there is currently a discussion in the region whether to again make a regional approach, and we leave that for you, but in principle we are ready to sign sort of here and now, and the text is already there. So I think this is a discussion we certainly need to have. And it will be important to, if I now look at the question from Sarah from New Vision to me about exports, it will simply be important to have that agreement to be able to continue on the successful path that we are on already. And I think there's a lot of untapped opportunity, as you said. First of all, I think we should, it's always good to start where we have seen success already, and that is obviously coffee. 70% of the production here goes to Europe, and it is a growth market, not only in Europe, but also globally, that Uganda can take advantage of, I think. And obviously there you can think in both in terms of volume, you can simply increase the production volume. But you can also, as we have both concluded, you can work on the value addition. You know, from, let's say, washing, drying, packaging, roasting, you know, there's a long way. And we have to understand that the coffee business is quite conservative. It has been done in a specific way for hundreds of years. So it will probably take some time before Uganda reaches sort of the final point in value addition that you spoke about, with basically ready packaged coffee to be exported to Europe. But that is a good ambition to have. And meanwhile, we are certainly interested in all kinds of coffee that Uganda can export. We like your coffee a lot. So coffee is there, will always be there, I think. But as I mentioned, we also have this now, for example, with fish export. You have the sort of the fish culture here, fish, what do you call it, fish ponds, or no, fish farming, which I think is a growth sector in Uganda and could really be interesting, together with fruits and flowers, of course. And we have to look at also services like tourism, I think is very important. And I'm very glad that we are working in all of these sectors. So the coffee sector, we have a new program of 44 million euros to actually work on both the productivity and the value addition on coffee. We have a program for tourism, to increase tourism to Uganda. And you asked about structural challenges. So far the trade agreement is not an issue, may become so, but of course you have logistics. We are far away from the European market. Some of these products require a cool chain, and that's also something that we are working on. And currently I think we are setting up a cool storage at Entebbe, or close to Entebbe, airport to facilitate export of, for example, avocado, because Uganda has an incredible, good quality of avocado, which is very interesting for our consumers. So cool chain logistics is a challenge, but it can be managed, I'm certain. I normally tell people that, if we could have the Ugandan pineapple as it is here in Europe, it would double the pineapple market in Europe, because Europeans simply do not know that there is such a tasty and sweet pineapple as yours. What we eat is some kind of grayish thing, tasteless in many ways. So if that could come, but there is some kind of challenge with that. It contains a lot of sugar. That makes it a bit vulnerable to mold and it rottens quickly during transport. I've tried to find out, but so that is there are many opportunities in that. Then we have it looks nice when I'm telling you that we have tariff-free trade and so on, and that is certainly true. But it doesn't mean that you can just bring anything to Europe in any shape, So that is phytosanitary standards. So, for example, the fish was not certified before. We have needed to look into that. What does it look like? Is the fish healthy and so on? Are the oranges healthy? Is the mango, does it look, the way it should and so on? Because simply the consumers in Europe want very high quality products, which Uganda certainly can produce. I've seen avocados going to Europe that looks like, some kind of paradise avocados. They're absolutely faultless avocados. So that can certainly be done, but not by anyone and in whatever way. It needs a lot of investment and consistency in quality and so on. Also, I think when it comes to other sectors, something that, in the global discussion, we're all talking about critical raw materials, things that can be mined in many African countries. And Uganda has a lot of interesting things in the ground. And that's another area where we are interested to partner with Uganda and see how we can do that really in a win-win way, so that, again, the value addition is made here and we both benefit from this transaction, so to speak. I visited not long ago a tin mine, or as they say in a cassiterite mine. That's the, I think, scientific name for the tin ore. And that was very interesting, because there they take out the rocks and they sort of chop them and melt it down into exportable pieces. So this is, I think, the future as well, and certainly something we are interested in. Now I spoke a lot, but basically that's the answer. Unless, of course, my colleague Carolina here wants to add something, perhaps on what we are doing to facilitate this.
Thank you very much. Yes, you mentioned pretty much all the key points. The only thing I would like to add in terms of you asked about both untapped opportunities and structural constraints. I think one of the key structural constraints you mentioned is the high quality standards demanded by the EU market, and from the EU side, in the spirit of partnership, we are investing a lot in helping Ugandan farmers and producers in various sectors to meet those standards, including through this new project that we started last year on sanitary and phytosanitary standards. So that's an area that we're working jointly on. Another issue is that the EU market demands not only very high quality products, but also products that help us comply with our commitments when it comes to, for example, combating climate change, protecting the environment, combating child labor, supporting labor rights, etc. So these are also, in a way, you could see it as structural constraints, because it means that Ugandan products also need to meet those standards before they can reach the European market. But you can also see it as an opportunity, because, of course, these are areas where we also have a common objective with the government of Uganda and with the people who work in these sectors that we want to develop products that meet the highest standards of labor rights, of environmental protection, etc. So we are also working very closely with the government, with the producers and so on in the coffee sector, in forestry, in mining, to, for example, combat child labor, to ensure that Ugandan coffee meets the traceability requirements related to the EU deforestation regulation. We have a forest partnership where we work together to ensure that Ugandan forests are not depleted, but that we can promote sustainable forest value chains and so on. So yeah, could be seen as a constraint, but I also think in the long run it's an opportunity for Uganda to meet those kind of standards, and it will allow Ugandan products to stand out on a global market, and we're making very good progress on many of those. Thank you.
Yes, please, more questions. We can have another round of questions.
What lies ahead, Jen, after this 50 years? What new concrete ideas or programs do you have in place, or new areas of development you have for Uganda?
Your name, please, and media house.
Rona, Nahabu, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Have a second round of questions, please.
My name is Mana of EUandUganda TV. My concern is about in these 50 years, and even as recent as just last month, we've always observed that there is friction, political friction between the EU and Uganda, whereby the authorities always say you're meddling in our affairs, and then the ordinary citizens think that the EU is not doing enough to put pressure on the government to observe, the governance and the democratic rights and space that they should enjoy. What's your view on that?
One more question, please.
Thank you. My Faraja from the Daily Monitor. Over the last 2 years, the European Union has been a very reliable partner in terms of supporting Uganda's humanitarian causes, specifically the refugee crisis. But as we have noted or noticed over the last few years, Uganda's refugee crisis is even escalating, if not getting worse. But the support from the partners, including the EU, is dwindling very fast. So I would like to know, over the next 50 years, what is the European Union position in terms of supporting Uganda's humanitarian causes? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these questions. And yes, it's a very interesting question, what lies ahead in the next 50 years. And I wish I had that crystal ball to really be able to look into the future with everything that it holds on artificial intelligence and these things, which will most likely affect also the way we work together with Uganda here, I'm sure. I don't dare to look perhaps that far away, but I think, I think the previous question really pointed to the many ways that we can work together in, let's say, the growing our economies together in a win-win. I mean, I'm talking more about our approaches to things. I think that would be to always make sure that there's a win-win situation in our collaboration, and then to look really at where our interests meet and how we can boost these sectors. There are obviously these sectors in the economy that we can focus on, the low-hanging fruits like coffee and fruit, vegetables, fish now, tourism, and so on. And beyond that, I would say it depends very much also how our economies develop. We were hopeful that Uganda will now take not only the step into a middle-income economy, but also beyond that, and that means that there will then be manufacturing, for example, here in Uganda, of things that I cannot really foresee, but that I'm very certain that the European market will be interested in. So again, what I can promise is we will be here. We will take all these opportunities. We will transform them into win-win situations, and therefore both our economies and our partnership will grow, I think. Beyond the economy, of course, we are interested to work with Uganda, here in Uganda, of course, but also with Uganda in the region. Uganda is a very important regional stabilizing factor, shock absorber. And there we can see that there are other countries in this region which are not as stable and which unfortunately may remain unstable for a long time. And that, I think, requires our joint efforts. Later today, I may ask my deputy Guillaume to say a few more words about our support to regional stability. So we have the domestic side, we have the region where we will certainly work together, continue working together. And then we have the global level, where, as I noted, Uganda, I think, is looking more and more outside its own borders, being more active at the global level in the UN, in the non-aligned movement now. Obviously also on the continent with the African Union, where there's also a very strong African Union, European Union collaboration. And as part of that, we are of course hopeful that we will find areas where we could be aligned with Uganda in the building of new structures in multilateral cooperation. I think where we are now, it's a bit difficult to predict. We are in quite tumultuous times at the international level. But well, my wish would be that the European Union and Uganda could find areas there where we can march together and make sure that the international exchange, the global exchanges on the diplomatic side, are as efficient as possible and take into consideration, for example, also African views on the global stage. I hope that responds to the question. Do you want to add something, Ambassador Mugara, perhaps?
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador Ian. In terms of, I think there was somebody, Mr. Agaba from Daily Monitor, he had asked something about the escalating refugee crisis. Yes, we are hosting close to 1.9 million refugees currently. And the main reason is because of the instability that we have in the region. And while we seek support to maintain the people who are here, I think the greater focus should be on addressing the root causes as to why these people end up here. And as Ambassador Ian said, we also have a strong partnership in matters of peace and security. Uganda has just been re-elected to the African Union Peace and Security Council. And our President, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, is spearheading a lot of initiatives in the region in order to make sure that we try to contribute towards resolving the conflicts in the DRC. We are close to 500,000 refugees flowing into the country. South Sudan, we have almost 1 million refugees from South Sudan. The situation in Sudan, and of course, we are partnering in order to make sure that there is greater stability in Somalia. So the support is dwindling, but we are looking at addressing the root causes so that these numbers can eventually end up going back to their countries, because they're here because of a number of reasons, but mainly instability in their countries. I think that is what I will say. There was an issue of what do we see going forward in the next 50 years. I think Ambassador Ian has answered it very well, considering that none of us has a crystal ball to know what will be happening in 50 years. But we are seeing a lot of, digitalization, with AI, and there will be quite a lot, because as Uganda, we are looking forward to having a GDP of 500 billion in the next 10 years, 15 years. So that will definitely push us from probably from middle income country to some other. So we don't know what will happen in 50 years, but the partnership definitely will be strong and stronger. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ambassador. And then there was a question about, I think it was called political friction, right? Obviously, as a diplomat, I would not put it that way, but I understand what you are talking about. And I would rather first focus on the good alignment that we have in many areas. And this described, we have many things to work on in the economy, in diplomacy, in the region, global affairs, and so on. But of course, we are not fully aligned, and there are moments when we don't think alike. And I think, Ambassador Mugarva, you already concluded that, and I think you said, which I want to repeat, that as good friends, as partners, you must also understand that you cannot always be on the same side. But being good partners, we can talk about that. We can have a dialogue about this. And we are not afraid on the European side to say things, to tell Uganda, to tell its government things that we see, concerns that we have. And we are sometimes doing that in statements, in sort of in the open, and that's what I think you refer to as sort of putting pressure on and so on. But to be honest, we are diplomats, and our tool in diplomacy is mainly meetings sort of behind the scenes. And I must say I prefer that way. It will always be a mixture of public statements and direct talks with the government, in which I think you can testify. We have raised our concerns many times, and that's quite a productive way of discussing things, I believe. So it's very important for me, as the European Union ambassador here, to make sure that the government should know where they have the European Union in these sensitive areas where we are not on the same line, perhaps. And they should not read about it. You have to excuse us as journalists. They will not then read about it for the first time in the newspaper. But that doesn't mean that we cannot speak out also in newspapers if it is something that has already been discussed with the government. So, for example, we took great interest in the elections in Uganda. We had our observers out in the country from the European Union member state embassies and our own delegation. There was then a statement, an official statement from the European Union in Brussels, and there was also a so-called resolution, a statement from the European Parliament. And these are things now that we will certainly want to discuss with the government, and have already started to do so. So that's just as an example of how we work. We normally sit down and discuss directly our concerns with the government, and we are hopeful that we will have a so-called partnership dialogue pretty soon, where we sit down in a more of a formalized manner and go through certain aspects of our partnership. I hope that also answers the question. Is there anything you would like to add, President Mugarva? No. Very good. And then I thought we would have our humanitarian head of office here. Now we have not. It was about the humanitarian aspects, refugees. I don't know if Jacob later would want to add. You can do that, but let me just say that I agree with you. The situation is challenging. I mean, first of all, we have to note the very progressive, positive policy of the Ugandan government to allow normally refugees from the region here, quite unhindered, to settle in Uganda, seeking refuge here, both from, let's say, the DRC, South Sudan, and other countries. We have always supported that policy, and normally we have a budget of about 30 million euros annually to support humanitarian causes in Uganda. It's normally refugees, but it could also be the fight against Ebola we have had the Ebola outbreaks in the last few years. I think when we look at the refugees in Uganda, we look at it first as a humanitarian issue, but also as a more long-term issue where we mix the humanitarian support with long-term support for refugees and their host communities. And we are doing everything we can to make sure that we can stand up also on that side for Uganda and for these refugees so that we can remain a reliable and predictable partner here. I think we need to think outside of the box as well, because it may be that the funding is going down in general. And I'm sure that we now dialogue with the government. It's an ongoing discussion. We can find ways of working, creatively in this area to make sure that the refugees can still arrive. However, it's important to say we should also make an effort to avoid refugees coming, meaning peace and stability in the region. It shouldn't be the way it is now, that you have sort of basically regular flows of refugees from the DRC and South Sudan because of conflicts in those countries. It's very important to work at the diplomatic level with the region to make sure that there is also more of a peaceful development in the neighboring countries. Again, Uganda stand out as a shock absorber for the region. I don't know, Jacob, would you like to say something more about this?
Just as a compliment, thank you. So I'm leading on the development side our contribution to the refugee response as well, next to infrastructure. And what we are trying to achieve together with the Ugandan government and other partners is graduating refugees from humanitarian assistance to make them self-reliant and make them active contributors to the Ugandan economy and to the Ugandan development. And I think we are having good results in this area. And I think by orientating development funding also to the host communities and the refugees, we can use the limited humanitarian funds for new arrivals and those who are the most vulnerable. And yeah, this is just a compliment that I think working towards self-reliance will allow Uganda to actually see the refugees more and more becoming active contributors to the economy and seeing it also as an opportunity for those remote areas where they are settling in.
Thanks a lot, Jacob. And certainly I just want to mark it again that we're always available for you if you have questions. And I think it would have been a good idea for our head of office from the European Union's humanitarian branch to be here and say a few words. But he is available at any other occasions, as are the rest of us. Let's see if there are other questions now. While you think about more questions, I have mentioned several times our support for regional peace and security, stability, and the important work that Uganda is doing, and therefore the important partnership that we have with Uganda. Well, taking a very good example is the combating violent extremism in Somalia, where you have boots on the ground, sometimes sacrificing themselves from the UPDF, and where the European Union, through various mechanisms, including the African Union, is funding those troops. And I was thinking, my deputy here, Guillaume Chatrin, who has worked many years in this region, including in DRC, in Kinshasa, and on the Horn of Africa. Just asking you, Guillaume, when you look at the region with all your experience, what can we say about the EU's role here and also Uganda's role and how we work together? Could you say a few words about this for our audience here?
Thank you, Ambassador. Well, you and Ambassador Mugura have touched upon some of those aspects already, but I think if we look at the 50 years of partnership, one thing is certain, is that Uganda is a country that has evolved a lot. And I was having lunch yesterday with people who have been working for the delegation in the late 70s and 80s. They were telling me being at the first delegation office that was, I think, in the UBC Tower, something on Kampala Road, looking in April 79, the Tanzanian troops entering into Kampala, or in 86, in January 86, being asked to stay at home where the troops of the NRA were entering Kampala. This is a situation that is not possible today, that we could not imagine in Kampala. In Kampala today, Uganda is a provider of security, not a country that is affected by this conflict. And so if we look at peace and security, I think we look at it through three dimensions, through steps. The first is Uganda building its credibility as a stabilization actor by its own history, by the fact that Uganda has gone through the stabilization process, notably in the north that you mentioned, where the EU has been supportive through diplomatic engagement, through support to mediation. The EU as an observer into the Juba talks started in 2006, that involved the government and LRA. And when the LRA decided to break the negotiation, then the EU stepped up its support. When the threat of the LRA became regional, the EU supported the African Union mandated mission, the LRA, to provide funding to the troops of Uganda, of Central African Republic, and of DRC to project themselves in the regions and to fight against the LRA, to degrade the forces, and to allow, through this military approach, a political process that achieved the peace and the downgrading, the final downgrading process, to the internal stabilization of Uganda. And then through this experience, Uganda have decided to unpredictable funding. And as the mission is evolving in Somalia, the EU remains strong and predictable partners to enable the Ugandan efforts in the regional peace and security. And then the third dimension is the diplomatic engagement. Uganda has been a strong partner, a strong actor involved in mediation in South Sudan, in Burundi, in DRC, and in all those activities, in all this intervention, the EU has stepped as a strong partners, either through the African Union mechanism, either through the regional mechanism, IGAD or East African Community, to support and to enable Uganda in its diplomatic engagement. So as a conclusion, that's what I could say, that the EU has stepped every time Uganda needed support from a diplomatic partners. Uganda has been present, and EU has been present alongside Uganda, and EU will remain present alongside Uganda.
Thanks a lot, Guillaume, and I know that you're speaking from a lot of experience in the region, and perhaps this is a very good occasion to actually express a lot of gratitude to Uganda for its role in the region. I'm again thinking in where we are working together in Somalia, where, I mean, yes, we are funding your troops, but they are the ones on the ground, and they are the ones making the sacrifices for the common good that we work on in Somalia. So I want to thank Uganda, the Ugandan government, and notably the Ugandan People's Defense Forces, UPDF, for their strong involvement and our good cooperation on this. Thank you. Let's see if there are other questions. Here.
I was looking at the grant that you said EU put in order to trigger appetite from European lenders to support investments here, mostly infrastructure. I wonder, when was this fund formed, and also how much has it triggered? How much money has it triggered? Specifically coming from Europe into Uganda.
Thanks a lot for that question. It's something we are happy to talk about. I will give the microphone to my colleague, Head of Cooperation, Carolina Hedström. But just to say that when we work on those grants that then leverage other loans, mainly from the European Investment Bank, but also from Team Europe members from our member states. So in the example of the hydropower plant Chirana-Lobale, it's the grant that will then complement and make the loans from the European Investment Bank more favorable, let's say, and also loans from the French Development Corporation. And then we have other projects that we are looking into, let's say the meter gauge railway that could play an important role still, although, you know, in many countries they are transforming to the standard gauge railway, but the meter gauge railway here could play an important role as a commuter railway for people who live in the outskirts of Kampala in the direction of Jinja. That's another project that we are looking into, and we have several of these, but I will let Carolina Hedström say a few words.
Thank you very much. You referred to a grant asking for a specific number. I think I'm not able to talk about one grant because this is increasingly the way we work, that we use our development cooperation funding to leverage more investment. This is a way, as your colleague was, or maybe it was you asking earlier about for the refugee response, that even if the actual overall amount of humanitarian and development funding globally is decreasing, we are trying to find smarter ways of achieving the same results or even better results. So this is one of the ways that we work increasingly, that we don't just give a grant, enable more concessional loans to facilitate investment and so on. So as Ambassador Shadek mentioned, one example is the EU support to the rehabilitation of the Kiranalobale hydropower system, where we are providing a 30 million euro grant from the European Union, and this is then complemented by concessional loans from the European Investment Bank and the French Development Agency, leading to a total investment package of 170 million euro. So this is the one example of that kind of leverage effect, and we're working more and more in that way, and so are many of our member states. So there are plenty of examples like that. Increasingly also, this is what we're doing in our support, for example, in the agricultural sectors and some of the value chains that we invest in. We talked about coffee before, about forestry. We are also using grant funding to provide more accessible finance to, in particular, small-scale businesses in these sectors. For example, forestry is an area where it's very difficult for actors along the timber value chain to get access to finance because it's such a long-term investment. So many commercial banks don't want to give loans for forestry. So that's an area where we can come in, provide some grant funding that would provide guarantees or other ways in which different actors along the timber value chain can get better access to finance. We also support a number of different financial mechanisms, the yield fund, many green funds, specific funds that support small and medium enterprises, especially those in environmental sectors, women-led businesses, youth-led businesses, to have better access to finance. And the European Investment Bank is also providing this kind of intermediate lending concessional loans. So I'm not able to give a specific figure, but this is a much more common way of working across the board.
Thank you, Carolina. Hope we explained that, all its aspects. Any other questions here from the audience? I was actually thinking, so we should probably try to conclude. As you can see that the lunch is coming. You can still have 2 minutes to think, because I'm thinking to give back the microphone to Carolina here. We talked about our work for jobs creation, trade, investment, the value addition and so on. And now we have some important events coming up, like the Business Forum. It's well known here, and as I had mentioned during the years that we have been doing these business forums, actually the trade turnover has increased substantially, and we think that the business forums have actually contributed a lot to that. So I think we can say a few words about the one we are planning later this year, and also perhaps some of the other events like the study fair, which could interest many young Ugandans, and some of the Ugandan events like the Tourism Expo and the Renewable Energy Conference, that where we want to take part in a perhaps even more impactful way than in previous events. Carolina, why don't you say a few words?
Thank you very much. Yes, so as the ambassador mentioned, this today is just the launch of this celebration, but it will continue throughout the year. So you will see plenty of events and information from us during the year, and we look forward to engaging with you more on those. And don't hesitate to reach out whenever you come across an EU event this year that you want more information on. One of those is the EU-Uganda Study Fair, which we are organizing together with the government of Uganda and Makerere University, which will be held in early June, where we will bring universities and research institutes from across the European Union to Uganda to interact with Ugandan students and universities' research opportunities. So that will be a very exciting event. And then we have the business forum, which we have organized now several years in a row. We are currently planning this year's business forum, which will probably take place in October. So also looking forward to engaging with you closer to the time, those who are interested in that. This is also one of the ways in which we try to build connections between Ugandan businesses and European businesses, investors. We do matchmaking and so on. So that's proven to be a very, very appreciated event. And then, of course, there are events that are organized by the government of Uganda or by some of our other partners. We are very excited this year to participate, hopefully even more than we usually do, at the Pearl of Africa Tourism Expo, because as you may have seen just a few days ago, we announced that we are launching a new program supporting the tourism, sustainable tourism sector. So this is something we will work much more closely on in the coming year, and launching new projects, and we'll talk a bit about that at the expo as well. And then, of course, we have the Renewable Energy Conference later in the year, which we always participate in. Renewable energy is one of our key investment areas, and in addition to the big flagship project of the Kiranalubala rehabilitation, we also have a number of other initiatives in the energy sector. And again, Jakob is the colleague who is overseeing our work in the energy sector as well as infrastructure. So feel free to ask him for more details about that. But that's just a snapshot of some of the events coming up during the year. I'm sure we will have other things that are yet to be announced as well.
Thank you very much, Carolina. I don't think we have more questions, so let's wrap up now and have lunch together. And again, before doing so, I want to thank all of you for joining us here at this festive launch of our celebrations. We are very, very happy and we're looking forward to this, to celebrating this year together with all of you. We hope to see your interest. sounding board that accompanies us into the future. Guillaume is I think, hinting that I could market our social media outlets as well. We have the Twitter, the X account, the delegations, and my own. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, and we also start in LinkedIn, it seems. So we are everywhere. We are with you here, and we are with you in cyberspace. So please interact with us, call the colleagues if you have questions, and let's engage in our partnership together. So with those words, thanks a lot, and welcome to enjoy the buffet here, and which also gives some room for more individual follow-up, perhaps. Thanks a lot.